Welcome to JLive. I'm Laura Mandel, JArts Executive Director, and it's great to be with you for JLive, our JArts virtual series of bite-sized conversations about Jewish life and art with the best artists with Boston connections. Today, I'm with theater maker Jason Salvick, founder of the Liars and Believers Theater Company, a former Gann Academy theater teacher, and so much more. So welcome, Jason.
Thanks. I'm sitting here still humming the Shlomo Artzi song.
You and me both. Okay, so with that in mind, I would love to kick us off with a video of a piece you did a few years ago called Heaven and Hell, so that we can get a sense of who you are. So let's start there.
Oh, dear.
But just bring us more grog and another red steak. Let it rain, let it hail, let it rain frogs and toads, but just bring us more ale. We'll have 10 for the road. Let it blow, let it roar, let it rain bats from hell. Wipe their asses and pluck them, we'll eat them as well.
Died at a sign that said all you can eat for 10 bob. When the doctors were done pumping out his insides, he came back the next morning to finish the job.
Just bring us tobacco and tucker and booze. So who cares about heaven or burning beneath beneath when we're all busy digging our graves with our teeth.
All right, so Jason, I think we've gotten a taste of some of what you and Liars and Believers are all about. And we just saw a lot in there. I mean, I know up at the top, I heard some mooing, there was a lot of dance, which I love, and some circus, which I know is a big part of what you do, a lot of performers. Tell us about this piece and the many parts that sort of led to what is now Liars and Believers.
Sure. That was a show called Heaven and Hell, adapted from the album by Joe Jackson, and I was commissioned by the Boston Conservatory, which is now part of Berkeley, to create the show collaboratively with their students, and it was their spring musical. So I worked with them for almost an entire academic year, I started with this album that had really, I had this incredibly visceral and visual experience of the music. And so then I started with those things as prompts and worked through all kinds of improvisation exercises and things and to develop what the thing was. It was an enormous collaborative process. So there were, let me think. I think there were 26 actors and dancers. Then there were 16 live musicians for the band. So all that music was live. Plus there's the music director who also was the arranger and the choreographer who was also, she staged it with me, plus a bunch of other musicians who helped transcribe the music, and innumerable artists, costume designers and prop designers and puppet makers and mask makers. It was this enormous collaborative process. And a bunch of things about that really launched me in the career, in the direct career direction I'm going now. First of all, the collaborative aspect of it I loved. And that's the core of what I do now. I don't write plays. I create them with other people, and I shepherd a whole complex process. The emphasis on the visual and the physical and the sensual, you can almost smell the show. When you walked into the house, the actors were all over the theater. And the whole theater was foggy, and so like the show was going on as soon as you came in the doors. And also it digs at things that are kind of socio-political without being overtly political about today's context. That show is from 2007, and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, oh, that's so still relevant. Sadly, between the violence and the refugees and the consumerism, I wish it were less relevant than it still looks to my eye. But that was the show that got me going, oh, this is what I want to do. And so I spent the next 2 years after that figuring out how to make a company. And 2 years later in 2009, launched Liars and Believers to do that, just without like extraordinary amounts of money and institutional support. It was an amazing project. Honestly, I had so many resources. I had so much money. Like they finally said no to me when I said, okay, can we have an actor on the 3rd floor of this, because the set was 3 stories high. Can we have an actor fall from the 3rd floor and go through the floor? And they're like, no, you cannot have that. Okay, there is a limit.
You got to ask to know. That's my theory, right?
You got to ask. Maybe that wasn't the limit.
It.
Maybe they would say, okay. I didn't want to hurt him.
I just love how all of your creativity and sort of thinking differently about theater, as you told me, clearly goes back to your childhood, because I love that you told me when you were little, people would come to the house and you would play a game with them called the Mashed Man.
That's correct. The mashed man. Yeah. The adults would come. I mean, I was like 3, 4. And the adults would come over and I would instruct them, and it would be a very involved game. I mean, but there were scenes that we were playing, and there were kidnappings and ransoms, and there was like, I had a cowboy hat and mask, and clearly this was Lone Ranger territory, and just would play the whole games with them. I was directing I was I was directing people from age 3.
You sound like my daughter.
Then
Maybe that
good luck
bodes
to
well. Well, so clearly from the time you were tiny, it was very evident that this was your calling. I think even on the collaborative front, it sounds like. But you also said that going to camp at Young Judea really helped form your identity and trips to Israel. So let's talk about that a little. What was it about camp that really pushed you into this Jewish theater space and thinking differently about how you do theater?
I wouldn't say I do Jewish theater. I would say I am an artist, and I'm very Jewy. I'm so Jewy. Oh my God. I'm like the Jewiest Jew in the room, in every rehearsal room. But my Jewish identity is really strong, and it just infuses all of my work. So even when I'm not doing a Jewish play, I can't help it. It's just who I am.
Yeah.
So I grew up in a Jewish youth movement called Young Judea. Shout out to Young Judea. And I went to Camp Tel Yehuda, and the arts were really big there. It wasn't an arts camp, and there are a lot of sports too. I'm just kind of not really a sport kid. But there were a lot of arts. Everyone was doing singing and music and dance and crafts and plays and folk dance and folk songs, and we would at a certain age started writing our own plays as campers. So like we would, when I was like a senior camper, we did the camp play, and we had 2.5 days. And so we, as a group, sat down and you're like, it's not even a question. You write the play and you write the songs, and then you stage them, and there's your play. Boom, done. And as growing up, going into staff, I did every job in this camp. I was from a camper all the way up, and then I was kitchen staff multiple times, multiple years, and I was the drama specialist one year, and I was a junior counselor, and like a bunk counselor, and a senior counselor. I just went on and on and on. And then I worked in the movement during the year. But in all of these iterations, using theater, writing songs on the fly, like, okay, it's 10 o'clock at night and you're sitting down with your staff, and tomorrow morning the kids arrive and we need a song. What are we going to do? And you just sit down and you write a song. I could not tell you how many I wrote, but the comfort, because of all that, I have a comfort level with just doing things on the fly. Just, oh, you need a song right now? Great. Give me 30 minutes. Boom. Or give me 10 minutes. And I don't mind. And they may not be the best songs in the world, but the biggest hurdle to get over is just starting. Just do a thing. Because you can make better a thing that's meh, but you can't make better a thing that doesn't exist.
That is great advice to people trying to make art.
Yeah, you just have to do it and not be afraid that it's garbage. And I now, that's a real tenet of how I work with my company. We create original work, and I give them an assignment. I make a game out of it. Once we've done all the hard dramaturgical work to figure out what's the story we're telling, how does it work, then I say, okay, make a scene for me. It has to have this plot point, and you have to have a circle. You have to have a moment where everybody falls down in unison, a moment that's in fast speed, a moment that's in slow motion, a moment where someone sits on someone. It has to include a chicken. You have to have a line from a commercial that's on TV right now, and you have 7 minutes. Go. And it's an impossible task, but because they're focused on just filling the checklist, they turn off the censor about, is this any good or not? And it frees their creativity. And then we reiterate a lot. So that, like, that's part of how my experience at camp influenced me. Another part is I went to Young Judea, at least, you know, at the time, I can't say for now, but was really focused on peer leadership and empowerment. And my whole way of working with people was formed in my time in this Jewish camp. And then beyond that, I've always been, from the time I was young, a kind of religious, spiritual kind of person. Like, I was the kid who liked going to shul as a kid. I liked my bar mitzvah. And I went to shul afterwards just because I liked high holidays. I still like high holidays. Yom Kippur is my favorite.
There's something so theatrical about it. It's not
Totally.
surprising to me.
Right? You're like,
totally.
I mean, like, you wear the kittel, the white thing, and the in between my like kittel and then my big tallis up over my head. It's a great costume. And then you do the like bowing down during the thing, and not to mention, then you come to Shmini Atzeret and you're like waving like plants around and whacking things. This is good stuff. And I've always been like that. And then my time in a Jewish youth movement and a Jewish camp, and then going to Israel, just supercharged my Jewish identity and just really drove me deeper and deeper into it. I lived in Israel for several years and was this close to making Aliyah. It just, that kept on going. And it's now so deep in my consciousness that it's really a profound part of how I work. I've done a bunch of plays on Jewish texts. It colors my moral code, my sense of how I engage with the world. So even when I'm not doing a Jewish play, you know, if you're a Yid and you're sitting in the audience, it's gonna feel familiar,
get it.
right? Even if it's Othello.
Yep.
There's something about it you're going to feel because we're in the same tribe, and so I'm speaking your language.
Yeah, well, you bring the specificity to the universality of a lot of the themes you're bringing in your work. And I think it's so interesting. Okay, so I want to fast forward us a little bit to today, because now that we get a sense of really who you are and how you came to be the theater maker that you are, I want to talk a little bit about this new project that we've been working on, Letters from Prague. I know you and I got to talking, must have been about a year ago now, in the middle of the pandemic, spurred by conversations we had been having in J-Arts through our theater works group, thinking about how do we do Jewish theater differently, better, online? Like, what does this look like? And you and I started talking, and you said, you know, Laura, I have this dream of this project called Letters from Prague. So tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. So this is a stage adaptation of my late mother-in-law's memoir. She escaped from Prague in 1939 when she was a little girl. She was 5, her sister was 7, her little brother was a baby, he wasn't a year old yet. And it's this very it's a harrowing story, and I will not recount the story here. But she and her immediate family, her parents and her siblings, they escaped. Most of the family did not. And then in the 80s, they found a batch of letters. And these were the letters that were being written back and forth between her grandmother and uncle and her parents in Chicago, and her grandmother, I'll tell you this one part is when her parents were escaping, the Nazi who was supposed to provide to them 5 visas only provided 3. So her mother and father and the baby immediately got on the boat to the States, and she and her sister were left with her grandmother and uncle, expecting they would within a week get on a boat and follow, and that's not what happened. It took many months, and it was terrifying. So anyway, when her father died in '88, they found this batch of letters which had been sent from her grandmother and uncle in Prague back to her family in Chicago. And it details the story in a unique way. Because like all Holocaust stories, it's a horrifying, terrible story, and moving and sad. It's like them all, and it doesn't distinguish itself for that in that way. But it is first-person contemporaneous narrative, meaning the story is being told by the people who are going through it and who do not survive as they go through it. So first of all, you're hearing the voices of the people who didn't make it. And second of all, you're hearing from them while it's happening, as opposed to in a recollection about what happened in the past or somebody else telling about them. And thirdly, it's incredibly intimate because these are letters from mother to daughter or from brother to sister or to brother-in-law. So they were never meant for public consumption. And as a result, you are getting a look into the minds and hearts of these people that you really would never otherwise see. So I encountered this book when I first started dating my wife about 16 years ago. And I was immediately struck by the vivid experience I had. And I thought this would make a great play. And I just sat on it, it percolated, and I knew at some point I would have the opportunity to start working on this and adapt it. And then the pandemic came and sort of everything came to a halt. And there was a lot more space on my calendar and more space in my head. And so then I started working on it, and that was when you and I spoke. So this is now going to be a stage adaptation with where we are bringing the letters to life on the stage, along with a lot of imagery, because along with the book is a treasury of images of the family, of the places where they lived in Prague, of where they went, of what happened, of the documents, the visas, not to mention the entire collection of works that are being held in the Holocaust Museum, to which we have access. So it will be this journey through the story, through the words of the people who are going through it, while we see the experience in images.
I just have to say, Jason, I am so taken by how you are really bringing these stories to life, not just, sharing, like you said, what happened in retrospect, but really thinking about while it was happening. And I think that's so important as we're thinking about understanding these real harrowing stories. So I just want everybody out there to know that there will be a reading of this, a first reading on April 26th at 7 p.m. at Gann Academy, and we'll make sure everybody gets the link through JArts, and I encourage you all to join us for that. But until we get to that, I am delighted. Thank you, Jason, for putting together a little bit of a snippet of a preview for us to see, because I think it's really moving and powerful to see how you've begun to create this and pull it together and have the actors start to read and rehearse. So before we watch this clip to close us out, I just want to say, Jason, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's my pleasure.
It's wonderful to have you in the JArts family and working on this theater piece with us. I'm excited to see what comes of it. And to all of you out there, please remember, if you enjoyed what you saw today, please know that JArts only exists because of generous community support from people like you. So please consider making a gift today. And Jason, we'll talk more later when Letters for Prague is actually happening. But until then, let's close us out with a little bit of video with actor Jesse Garlick reading pieces of this new piece.
Right, and it's also with Rebecca Lerhoff is the other actor.
Awesome, thank you.
Helgichka is my...
Helgica.
Helgichka. Helgichka.
Helgichka.
First syllable.
Helgichka. Helgichka.
And Rayushka.
Rayushka.
Masna Street, am I right? Masna Street.
My dearest children, I'm glad you seized this opportunity to be sure of a happy and contented life. May God grant that everything turns out as I wish for you.
Dear Imsha and Moshko, now you've arrived at the goal of your great journey. I congratulate you and wish you truly much happiness in your new beginning.
Every night, the children want me to tell them stories, to send them to sleep.
And while I'm writing, she's busying herself all around, dusting and generally putting things in order. And of course, Raya doesn't want to be left behind, so she fits into the role of waiting room assistant and turns the light on for the patients.
I haven't had time to look for someone for the children. And then just for 14 days, it's not really worth it.
I had a letter from the London Committee saying that my request had got as far as the short list of doctors who would be allowed to study and practice in Great Britain. Decision in a few weeks.
I shall miss them so much when they leave.
There have been some major changes since you left.
Let's put it behind us.